Good evening, everyone. Good evening. My name is Karima Jackson. I am the Community Engagement Lead for Unify Akron. And I would like to welcome you all to Inside the Civic Assembly on Housing. Tonight is an opportunity to celebrate the people who participated in this process. Our delegates, facilitators, and community partners, and everyone who supported this work. Tonight, this evening, is about taking a look back on the Civic Assembly experience, hearing honest reflections in their lived experience, while also, tonight is not about having all of the answers. It's about hearing from those who worked with one another and celebrating what happens when neighbors choose to engage across different perspectives. As you network this evening, we invite you to and encourage you to visit our community partner tables, ask questions, build new connections, and explore ways to stay involved in our community. Please join us in watching our overview video.
When we began this journey about 10 weeks ago, we had a room full of strangers, didn't we?
I have never seen a more diverse and representative coalition of committed Akronites in any process of this type, ever. From every neighborhood, every age, race, socioeconomic background, and profession. And all I could think is, oh my God, here they come.
We came in not knowing each other, but we got to work, learning about housing in Akron, studying a dozen proposed solutions for achieving our shared goal. We talked about the facts, the benefits, and the trade-offs. We provided our guidance on implementation.
We did not agree on everything. These were hard conversations. There were moments where it would have been easier just to, I'm gone. But nobody did. We stayed in the room. We listened to each other.
We all came together in pursuit of a common goal, and I never heard an angry word.
We live in a time where everything seems to be intentional about dividing us on things both big and small. But when you have the opportunity to get within 3 feet of others who may have some different perspectives and exposures than you discover that you have more in common than you have in conflict.
So here's how the voting worked. Every recommendation had to earn at least 2/3 supermajority support from this assembly to make it through. Of those 12, 9 proposals qualified with the 2/3 majority. To be recommended by the assembly, that set of 9 proposals needed to be endorsed again by a 2/3 supermajority. That meant, for many delegates, deciding whether to endorse the whole set, even if there were individual proposals you'd voted against.
The results are officially in. The 2026 Akron Civic Assembly on Housing has officially endorsed the qualifying proposals by 93%.
In partnership with you, distinguished city leaders, we respectfully submit our first and second recommendations for your thorough and thoughtful consideration.
First, creating a dedicated housing docket within the court system.
Create a public code violations database.
Establishing a system for civil housing citations.
Recommendation number 4 makes criminal history a protected class in housing.
Update zoning to make it easier to build tiny homes.
Issue a bond for housing.
Low-cost repair loans for local homeowners.
Enact comprehensive zoning reform.
The ninth recommendation is to offer down payment assistance to help more Akronites become homeowners.
We do understand the trade-offs too.
For example, setting up a housing docket takes a lot of resources.
Someone has to run it, and it has to actually reach the people that need it the most.
Delegates who were landlords in our assembly pointed out legitimate safety and legal concerns.
Zoning changes don't automatically build housing. Costs and finances still have to work.
And we know and understand that. We believe the benefits are worth it.
You will find the Assembly's full findings and guidance in the plan of the people.
If we're serious about actually fixing problems, we've got a really long road ahead. We, not just the delegates, our whole community, we've got to stay accountable.
The only way we can solve problems is by respecting each other, listening to each other, and building our future together. The good news is we have only just begun.
So at this time, please help me by welcoming our delegates and facilitators onto the stage. There's one more seat over there. Yep. Thank you all. Thank you all for joining us. To begin, we would like for you all to introduce yourselves, share your name, share your role in the Civic Assembly, and then what made you say yes to participating.
My name is Ted Forsberg. I live in Highland Square, and I'm a delegate to this wonderful group of people. When I was growing up, my parents instilled on me 3 things that I must do every day. My dad taught me I had to learn something every day. My mom told me to work hard, and both parents said, you must do a good deed every day. This group is a good deed plus every day.
Hello, I'm Richard Sherman. I lived in Akron my whole life. I joined Unified because I wanted to be educated about housing. Also wanted to plan a better future for my children, revolve around housing. And it's been a great group of Unified people that is a community outside of Unified. So I just wanted that information to really understand how housing works in my community.
My name is Kevin Smith. I am a certified business consultant, and I've worked in the financial services space now for just over 30 years. I did not sign up for Unified Akron. Actually, I'm someone who knows my background in finance, real estate acquisition, and a number of other things, ultimately put my name and email in the lottery, and I was fortunate enough to get drafted. And so that's how I ended up here.
Hi, my name is Wendy Duke. I am a member of that dread group called the Boomers, and we all have houses, and we're wondering, are we going to stay in our houses, or are they going to send us to the nursing home? So I'm very interested in housing for not only seniors, but for people with disabilities, for people who need a chance to have their own home. And that's why I participated as a delegate.
Oh, thank you. Hi, I'm Karen Hayburn, not that Karen. I put my name in for this group because I thought it sounded interesting. I have long believed that everyone deserves to have good health care, food to eat, and a safe place to sleep that they can call their own. I believe that the way we do that is through community. And what I found by joining this group, by getting my number picked, was that I'm right. It takes community. And now I have this wonderful community of friends that I didn't even know 6 or 7 months ago. And I could not be happier. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Romaniana Kellums, and I was one of the facilitators here at Unify. And the reason why I chose to participate in this civic assembly was to give back to this community. I'm a student at the University of Akron, so I just decided that you guys gave me something, so I should return the favor. So thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Jovan Bickerstaff, a sociologist by training, with a background in urban studies and planning. I came to Unify because I was trying to recall, what is Akron like? I left in the late 90s and came back recently to help with family. And when I saw the opportunity arise, for me it was an opportunity to give back, bringing some of the knowledge that I have about the issues around housing, but also to get a better understanding of what is Akron like. I left the week after I turned 18 and hadn't been back living here for more than 26 years. And I was blessed and honored to be a part of this group, to meet so many folks and to see the way that Akronites come together to really make the kinds of things that they want to happen come to fruition. Also a facilitator.
Hi, everybody. My name is Brittany Roner. I was a facilitator for the Civic Assembly. I've been part of the Akron community for, oh my gosh, close to 20 years. I'm an Akron graduate and have lived on the west side of the city for quite a while now. I threw my name into the ring for this opportunity because my life's motto is leave it better than you found it. And that's sort of my mission and what I do for my work. And I've worked in the private sector in terms of issuing positive change, transformation. So to be able to apply and see this experience at the community level was a first for me personally. And such a gift, and I'm like gonna start crying again at some point during this, so just apologies in advance for a little bit of the emotion. But I'm reminded just hearing these short, stories about why things find you, and I feel like this whole things just find you for a reason. So I'm glad to be here and seeing some familiar faces.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. Thank you.
Just a quick caveat to, she's going to be angry with me for doing this. But there's a lot of brain power and very talented people that have been part of this from varying different backgrounds. But one specific person I kind of want to highlight a little bit here that is with us today, and that is Dr. Bickerstaff. First, she's an Akron Public Schools graduate. Firestone, if I'm not mistaken, correct? Okay. I mean, she's not 1040 made, but that's all right. That education not only took her to MIT to continue her work, but also to Harvard. This is an ice cold sister sitting over here. Now she won't toot that horn, but I will.
Thank you so much. Thank you. For our first question, you guys answered the first part, but I just want you to keep in mind as you answer this main part, okay? What inspired you to participate in the Civic Assembly? We heard some. But what were your expectations going into it? What were your expectations going into the Civic Assembly? 10 weeks of conversation.
I was scratching my head because you had 65 people, men and women, highly educated, not so highly educated, rich people and poor people, young people, and I feel like the oldest one in the building. I never thought that 65 people could put it together, but I was amazed. I was so amazed that at the end I said, there is not a problem in the city of Akron that cannot be solved by people with good intentions. And these people have good intentions.
For me, what I was expected when I came into the building, I'm like, where is this going? There's a lot of people here. There's a lot of voices here. And my voice going to matter? And it was well put together to where my voice did matter, my opinion mattered, how I feel mattered. I was just all over the place when I got there, like, oh, it's homework. Oh, I don't want to do homework. And there was long hours, but it was a beautiful thing for me. And my expectations, it actually, my life has been on a better path since I joined this organization. So it's a beautiful thing for our community.
Expectations. I'm not exactly sure that I had any specifically. What I knew is I needed to make a contribution. Once I found out what it was about, because I ignored those emails for probably at least 2 weeks. I just thought it was spam or whatever. When I finally opened it and discovered what it was, I actually called Chicago to confirm that it wasn't some sort of spam or what. And they know, yeah, this is real, blah, 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 you know, okay. Once I discovered that, I had to go. I didn't have a choice, I had to participate because I thought the issue was too important to not, try to make a contribution. And so when you ask about expectation, my approach to that, I hearken my father's words in my ear. He would always ask me if I'm complaining about a problem, do you want to be a wood chopper or a chip gatherer? And obviously my response is always, well, I want to chop the wood. And his response was the same, then chop the wood and let the chips fall where they may. So my goal was to not necessarily have an expectation of what it was going to be, but to go in asking myself, how can I make a contribution to improve it, whatever it is? And I'm hoping that I was able to do that.
I was interested in joining a group of people that were going to be practicing more of a people's democratic process rather than a hierarchical one. No one came in and told us what to think. We had to learn from each other. Every time we met, we sat with new people at a table, 6 people plus a facilitator, and we switched up every time that we were meeting. So you got to know people very deeply through this process of sitting in what they call trusts. I did a little digging because I was fascinated by this idea of a civic assembly. It actually began in ancient Greece. And the ancient Greeks practiced elected democracy. They elected people. But they also realized that elected officials were very prone to things like corruption, which we know is happening still to this day. And so they had a process called sortion, in which people were picked randomly to come together in a civic assembly and come up with solutions to problems. And that's what we did. And I was fascinated by it, learned a lot from everyone. And now the problem is trying to convince the people of Akron that we are not some plot sent by corporations to buy up all the land in Akron and sell it for the highest amount. We are here for people of Akron. We want people of Akron to have their own homes, safe homes that they can afford, and they can choose where to live within the city. So that's my little speech there.
That little speech works for me. I have learned over my life not to make my expectations very high. That way, I'm rarely disappointed and I'm frequently surprised. I loved the community that we built in this group. I've told this before, so you can just go think something else for a minute if I've told it to you. The first time we got together as that civic assembly, you could have heard a pin drop in the room. People were whispering or not talking at all. Nobody really knew each other. Nobody knew what was going to happen. Nobody knew what was next. By the third time we got together, you couldn't hear yourself think. It was wonderful. People were greeting one another, and yes, someone would yell out every time I came in, "Oh, it's not that Karen." But I loved that. It was that sense of, I'm part of this. And I really believe that that's something that we've lost as people. We feel disconnected. And when you feel disconnected, you feel lost. You feel alone. You get scared. And you do dumb things because of it. Coming together the way we have, we listened to each other. We didn't always agree, right, Ted? Right. We didn't always agree. But we listened and we learned. And I can tell you, you see that I use this silly cane, that one piece that stands out to me is I left my stuff in the car one time. Morgan had no problem popping out to my car and bringing it for me, so I didn't have to go back out. One of the times that we got together was a really tough time for me, and someone said, "Just stay sitting here. I'll get your food. Don't worry. I got you." When I would walk and I would get tired and I would have trouble walking, somebody would always come up and grab my elbow and say, "I got you." Would help me up out of my seat, would help me sit down. They're still doing it, right, Smitty? I grew up in this city. I've spent most of my life here, except when I had to be out of town for a while for work. When I was growing up on North Hill, it was a community. It was wonderful. You couldn't step out of line because the minute you did, your mama knew before you got home. And you'd be sitting on the couch. You may as well just go there when you went in the door, because that was what was going to happen. If you were somewhere you weren't supposed to be, you'd hear, "Does your mama know you're over here?" Yes, yes, yes. I'm going to call your mama. Okay, now I'm in trouble. But also, you couldn't fall. You couldn't get lost. You couldn't feel sad. But what somebody saw you. And friends, that's what happened with us. We learned to see one another. And in learning to see one another, we matter to one another. And my hope is, along with all the housing things that we did, and there were some wonderful things that got accomplished, my hope is that each one of us will go out and in community help people to say, "Somebody saw me. Somebody saw me." And that made all the difference. Thanks.
Thank you. We have a question for the facilitators. Thank you all for sharing, delegates. Facilitators, thinking back, can you share or think of a moment when you saw meaningful dialogue or connection happen?
I can talk about my own connection and my own experience because as a facilitator, we were still integrated with the delegates. And something meaningful that happened to me, I believe I'm in a very small bubble in college. I don't get to experience and talk to the community members. So it was very nice to talk to people outside of my age group and outside of like the similar like education and things like that. It was nice to reach out and meet different people that are outside of my race and age and income. So that's something that was very beneficial for me for this experience.
So I think that as facilitators, we had a very interesting perspective in being able to see lots of different dynamics that were happening and trying to manage them also at the same time. The same way that Karen just mentioned, that first session, everybody was quiet and hesitant and reticent. By the time we got to the fourth or fifth session, we're like, so we're gonna need you to fill out these delegate surveys soon. But alas, the kinds of bonds, the kinds of familiarity that had grown, I think one of the things that I saw is that folks came with such radically different experiences, and they were so willing to learn from one another. And people who understood something were willing to teach in a way that always opened the door, right? To say, here's something that I had exposure to, here's something that I experienced, and here's a way that what I'm giving you might help you understand. They were willing to teach, but especially that they were willing to learn from one another all throughout. And I think that was one of the things that really made this magical.
I second that. And this is going to sound like a generic answer, but I promise you it's not. Every week I saw an amazing connection or learning point happen. Just when I thought it was like a peak moment, every week as we continue to build and learn and grow from each other, it was like, wow, we just even furthered that type of connection and learning and growth. For those of you that were not in the room at the time when it happened, but it very much felt like sitting down at a table with folks that normally would never go to coffee together, but you do. And in that moment, it wasn't like, why are we here? Why are we doing this? It wasn't this defensive nature. It was incredibly warm and curious and welcoming, and it was rooted in learning and discovery. And so I think that orientation and that mindfulness of like, I am here to learn and to grow, and even though I don't know you personally, I am willing to learn you and get to know you, and that openness was tremendous. And I think the more that we spent time together week by week, because as the colleagues I mentioned, we rotated throughout, different folks. So sometimes it was a brand new connection, but the power of trust had already been built, and it continued to be reinforced week by week. So for me, like I said, I don't know. I can't give you one example other than every time I got in the car and called my husband, I would be like, wow, something even more magical happened today, and here's why.
Thank you. Going back to you, facilitators, and following up after that question, what helped, or what do you think helped create an environment where people felt comfortable sharing openly?
I think Brittany brought up a really good word, trust. I think that was very important. I think that's why it worked out so well, because any accommodation that any of us needed, Unify was there and fixed it right away. We would say, oh, people are having, they're not grasping the concept as well as they could. They found out different ways to articulate their point. They did videos, they did summaries. So I think trust was one of the biggest things that Unify Akron really perfected during this experience.
I'll definitely echo that. I think that the Unify team was often building as they were flying in terms of taking in so much information, so much feedback, and making sure, as was said earlier by one of the delegates, your voice matters. That's why you're here. And so I think that there was a lot of goodwill that was created by the approach to taking feedback. I also think, though, that folks came willing to suspend their doubt, right? I'll say that for myself. I came in, as a sociologist always is, as a skeptic, right? And what I saw amongst the facilitators, amongst the delegates, was a continual willingness to be curious, to lean in, and to make sure that the benefit of doubt that was given always came from a place of openness and belief.
I was blown away by the trust in the, forgive me, it was like we the people of Akron, like the charter or the, commitment that the delegate group had made before we even stepped foot into the room to have our first deliberative conversation. When I saw that, I was just jazzed. I was like, here we go. This is amazing. There has been a baseline that has been established from the group that is going to be integral in formulating the suggestions and ideas for the city, and they have made personal, not very real and genuine commitments to each other, and that takes a lot of guts. It's one thing to write it down, it's another thing to live it. And I think that going in with that orientation, that that's the power of whole systems thinking. That's what the Civic Assembly builds, is how do we get every single voice heard and respected in the room, and we all have things that we hold ourselves to. And again, that's the foundation of trust in my experience, is it's what you do when no one's looking and that you don't actually have to do. And this group really stepped up and showed time and time again that they were willing to reach a hand out, just like Karen Shan. It's not required. That was nowhere as a rule. That's just something that is inherent when you have this collaborative, trusting environment, and one hand outreach lends to another. It's a chain effect.
Karima, could I add one last thing? I also think that the way that the Unify team organized the introduction into what deliberation was and how it would work gave people permission to disagree, to not see things the same way, and to recognize that I get to enter the door with my experience, with the things that I've encountered, and it is valid and it is welcome. And the way that we overlap might mean that we don't come to agreement. That doesn't mean that this isn't still purposeful, meaningful, and powerful.
Thank you. Thank you, three. Just going back to our delegates, can I have two of you answer this question, okay? Was there a time when your perspective shifted or was challenged, and what contributed to that change?
Okay, I guess there are no accidents in this, that I happen to be sitting near my dear brother here. One of the times where my perspective was challenged was regarding one of the initiatives to which we were deliberating on, and that is criminal history as a protected class. Initially, while I recognized that there are some bias in that environment and ultimately can preclude people with a criminal history from getting, affordable and safe housing, I wasn't quite sure that it needed to elevate to the level that would be akin to race or gender or, ADA, disabilities, those kinds of things. So I was a little torn initially about that particular initiative. But I sat in a trust with someone, essentially, when we were discussing it, that gave me some perspectives on it that I had not considered before. One in particular was the likelihood and propensity for a military veteran who suffers from PTSD. That person is more likely to commit violence or harm themselves or someone else than the general person who is a low-level offender with a criminal history. But we give preference to military veterans regardless of that history, but we potentially discriminate against those that are low-level offenders with a criminal background. Pivoted my perspective on the issue almost immediately. And right at that point, I leveled up from a certain kind of, I'm lukewarm about it, to that is a very valid point, and essentially it needs to be considered. Fortunately, that was one of the issues that got ratified in our deliberations. And so when I talk about being fortuitous, that particular trust, an individual who shared that perspective with me and helped me to elevate my thinking was this dear brother right here, Richard Sherman. And so it just kind of lucked up, or maybe it was, you know, a blessing that we sat next to one another. But I want to thank you for that, man, publicly, because I'm not sure that I shared that until now. But yeah, thanks for helping me level up, man. Sometimes they let the old plow horse run with the thoroughbreds.
Thank you. Anyone else? We're good. Okay. All right. A question for our delegates. And I'll have one or two of you answer this, okay? What did you learn about housing, your community, or your fellow residents that you didn't know before?
One of the things that I was most amazed about was that there were people that collect money for rent from people who are tenants and don't take care of them. But even worse, how can you go buy a building or a piece of property and let it deteriorate and fall apart? I don't get that. But what we did was to set in motion a plan to work on that problem through a database, through efforts at building inspectors, through efforts at a housing court that would deal with errant landlords. And maybe we can solve that problem. They should take care of the property, if not for the tenant, at least for themselves. But most important, for the tenants whose money they take.
Thank you. For our last question, has this experience changed the way you think about civic engagement or your role in the community? If so, how?
Absolutely. I feel more enraged every day. I want to go out there and get housing for everybody. Amen.
I have a different perspective on housing in the city in general. My perspective when I started this was North Hill. And I knew that a lot of homes on North Hill were being bought by out-of-town and out-of-state businesses and individuals. And I was cross about that because they really didn't have any investment in keeping the property up or making sure that things were okay. There hasn't been a day that goes by that I don't get a phone call or a text message or an email wanting to know if I'm ready to sell my house. They don't ever come from somebody in Akron. My new phrase is, if I get them on the phone and they ask me if I'm interested in selling my house, I tell them yes, $500,000. For $500,000, you can have my house. Now, if you ever saw my house, you'd know why that's hilarious. But I was sure that just happened on North Hill. And I learned it doesn't just happen on North Hill. I learned that empty houses where people have moved out because they couldn't continue to pay or because someone died aren't just houses on North Hill. They're all over the city. I learned that zoning ordinances literally handicap making changes so that more folks can live here and live safely. I am really trying not to be that Karen. I am really, I guess you could say, cranky about what I now see in this city that's really, to me, inexcusable. There's enough room for everybody. There's enough room for more. We have to have the will. And I see this group as pushing to have that will and pushing the city officials to have that will, to make a change, to do something different, to be innovative, and see that everybody has a safe place to live.
Thank you. The question was, has this experience changed the way you think about civic engagement or your role in the community? If so, how?
Really briefly, if I could, real quick. I had a conversation with Morgan here at the start of the function this evening, and we were talking about that very thing. And what I shared with her is this process, essentially, with the delegates, facilitators, and others who are involved, has created a certain level of discipleship around this issue. With the training, education, sharing, and development that we experienced, it enabled us to deploy out into the communities where we have our circles of influence, and ultimately now be able to educate and level up, if you will, others that might not be privy to some of the information that we were learning. As an example, 56% of the city's residents are renters. Well, I can guarantee you that 99% of the citizenry does not know that statistic. And so I really believe that creating discipleship and engagement in that kind of way with delegates and others who are involved in this process allows for a deployment into our varying communities where we can educate people and kind of level them up. I've done some of this very same kind of work in the area of education. Obviously, I do some things with the city. In fact, most people, they think either I work for Akron Public Schools, I work for the city, or I'm a preacher. I'm not sure about that last one, but Morgan and I shared the concept of the lone warrior or soldier, and we talked about Achilles in that way. And I think publicly, those of us that engage in voting in those processes, we will elect an individual to go deal with these problems, and then we'll leave the solutions strictly to them, and we're playing as spectators. This process creates an environment, a delegation group of disciples, if you will, that allow us not just to elect someone to solve the problem, but to man a post in assisting them in doing it. And in some cases, that requires, us playing the Frederick Douglass to their Abraham Lincoln. Sometimes it's a gentle nut, sometimes it's the carrot and the stick. So thanks for letting me share, but I thought that was a reasonable perspective to kind of articulate.
We have so much work to do. because most of the people, sadly, do not trust government anymore. And if you have been reading the stories about our zoning proposals on the Beacon, it's been posted on social media, most people think that politicians are the ones who came up with the proposals, and they're doing it so that they can pay off their corporate builder friends to come and build on all these empty lots in Akron and ruin the city. That is what people are talking about online in response to our proposals. So we have a lot of work to do. We have to let them know that, no, this wasn't the politicians who came up with these ideas. These are 65 demographically chosen people who got together and went through this process. And it's not simple telling that on social media. That's why I encourage my fellow panelists to join me in this ongoing debate, because we really need to use our deliberative practice, not get angry, but explain what happened and give them facts instead of mythologies. Thanks.
Thank you all for sharing your experiences, your honesty and openness, and willingness to engage in what made this process meaningful. Could you all please join me in giving them a round of applause? Thank you, delegates and facilitators. You all can take a step down and have a seat in the front 2 rows. Thank you. Please give us another round of applause. As they're transitioning down, to close our evening, we're going to have a one-to-one conversation with our Chief of Democracy Leagues, Morgan Lasher. Please join me in welcoming her to the stage. Morgan and I will be having a conversation about the learnings from Unify Akron's Civic Assembly on housing and what's in store for the next Civic Assembly. Hi, Morgan.
Thank y'all so much. Karima, you're such a fantastic moderator. Thank you.
I'm trying, right? So thank you for joining us. We're going to go through really quickly. We know we're pushing your time, but we have some questions for her. So first, what brought Unify America to Akron?
Yes. Some of y'all might know this story, but I will be brief.
I'm so sorry. First, could you introduce yourself for the folks who may not know you? I apologize.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Morgan Lasher. I work at Unify America, but most importantly, I am an Akronite. And Akron really raised me, and I was part of the group to bring the Civic Assembly to Akron alongside many people. So I work at Unify America, this national organization, and as you heard from Wendy, assemblies have been around for a very long time. And this idea of sortition and lottery-based government, really. But in the last 40 years has been this modern interpretation of what civic assemblies are. Ireland changed their constitution twice using a civic assembly model. France just changed some really cool laws about end-of-life care. Thousands of these have happened across the world, and about 12 have happened in the US. So Unify America's whole model was, could we do better public problem solving, and could we introduce more tools like the Civic Assembly to the US? My team, I was leaving Akron to do a lot of this work. My team ran a process in a little tiny town in Colorado, and what we learned there, which all the good community organizers in the room could have told us beforehand, was we were parachuting into a community, doing a cool process, and then packing up and leaving. We weren't actually adding any capacity into that local community. And the folks in Colorado said to us, where are you going? We got another issue we want to tackle this way. So it really changed our whole strategy. And instead of being this like fly-in nonprofit, we said, how can we actually do this with a community, but actually have the community do it itself in a way that can be durable and lasting and owned by the community truly. And because I'm from Akron, it felt like a really interesting place to start. Akron had a whole bunch of things that was on Unify America's checklist, including organizations who already know deliberation, who already have great facilitation skills. All of these ingredients are already here. They're already here, and there's people who want to change, and there are real problems that need public input. Sorry, I thought it was going to be shorter than that. Thank you for bearing with me.
Thank you. That was a combination of why. Do you have any more on Akron? What made Akron such a special, or even the topic?
Yes, yeah. So after the Colorado project where we really did this strategy shift, we did about 300 listening sessions around Akron to say, what do you think about the idea of an assembly? What do you think about topics? What does Akron really need public deliberation around? And what are the ingredients that are already here? Housing was one of those topics that came up over and over and over. Residents wanted to talk about it, but also people in power, government leaders, were like, this is something we have to put our arms around and we have to have movement on. So it was a bit of a matchmaking of, we don't want to do an assembly in partnership with the government when the government doesn't actually want to tackle that topic. And housing was one that electeds said, yeah, we need to talk about it. And the public said, yeah, we need to talk about it.
Yeah, thank you. What was one of the biggest challenges or learnings from this housing civic assembly?
So many learnings, so many learnings. One of the gifts of this group and this panel that you heard from, and also many of y'all in the audience, was your generosity when it comes to helping uncover learnings. And that is something of like all of the time, being a learning organization. This might be kind of radical to say, but I do hope this is the worst civic assembly Akron ever does. I hope we continue to learn from all the people on stage, and I hope every one of the assemblies in the future just gets better and better because we've learned so much from the people on stage and the people doing this work. In other parts of the world, this works differently. You could send a postcard to people in France and they would say, yes, I'd like to sign up. That's not at all how it has worked in the US. You have to have somebody who you trust invite you to do this thing. So we had a whole bunch of learnings around trusted messengers, how to really invite people to sign up in the first place. So we had 584, or maybe 83 people actually raise their hand to participate. I hope we've learned a lot so that next time that number could actually even increase. And 65 people got picked. That left more than 500 people who didn't. And we tested some things with the Super Assembly. We had 4 or 5 meetings where folks could weigh in on what was happening, learn more about the process, but I think there's so much more that we could learn from that group, with that group, of what else we could do together, how else you could put your fingerprint on this process together. And I'm looking at Dr. Bickerstaff, who has given us so many incredible learnings, as with everyone else, but one in particular that I'll point out is the learning journey that we need to take people on. It's one thing to build a table of folks who are different. It's a totally other thing to actually have folks engage with the content. And so really rethinking how much content we can put into the timeline and how we think about delivering that content in ways that everybody can engage with in the community and around all our tables. So I think there's a whole lot there to learn more of.
Thank you, thank you. What do you hope city leaders, community organizations, and residents take away from this experience?
I hope city leaders see residents as partners, as sometimes I feel like 3 minutes at a microphone feel like we're just setting up for a fight, when actually we're the ones with all of the answers. The people on this panel, the folks all in the audience, y'all are the ones who actually have the solutions. So I hope that these kinds of deliberative events can really point to the wisdom when you put people together who are different. And I would hope residents also get to see that too, that they have their fingerprints on laws and budgets and the world that they live in, the community that they live in, that's different because of their own self-government.
Thank you, Morgan. What gives you hope about the future of civic engagement in Akron and the Civic Assembly, the next Civic Assembly?
Tonight, this group on stage, this group here, that's gives me so much hope. And again, I think there's just so much for us to learn. There's so much for us to teach each other, but also to teach other cities in Ohio, for us to teach the next Civic Assembly in Akron, hopefully. But that just gives me so much hope. There's so much wisdom. How do we share it? How do we build it collectively?
Yeah. Thank you. Do you have any next steps for our audience and our viewers online?
Why, yes, we do. So this is a draft timeline. You'll see up here. The word draft is really, really important because we'd love to get your feedback on what opportunities actually sound interesting to you now. Really, the month of August, our Unify Akron team is focused a lot on listening more. What could we do better? What are the opportunities that would be most meaningful to plug in? And also doing some orientation and thinking about what comes next. How do we move the recommendations to real world impact? In September, impact teams meeting, but also we've been looking at a micro grant opportunity to encourage the work that's already happening. They are building communities inside your neighborhoods, you're putting together breakfast clubs. What are things that you would actually like to do more of that fosters that kind of collaboration and deliberative work? And again, part of these listening sessions are to do more intentional partnerships throughout the community. Who are the other organizations we should be working with, all in this ecosystem, and putting any of the ideas that you might have for events into practice. A couple of delegates have had a fantastic idea. There's some group messages happening or email chains happening, which can be a lot or a little. And we would love to put together some other way to communicate with folks. We're hoping to roll that out very soon as well. And then in November will be the first progress report from the city. So we'll have a big event in November where mayor's team, city council team will report back to the delegates, to the community, what's moved with your recommendations so far. But again, very draft. On the next slide, I think we have a QR code. Would love just to get your feedback on what of those sound interesting, what are things that's missing from that list, and what would you like to lead as part of next steps for this year too?
Thank you, Morgan. So a special thank you to our delegates for your commitment through this process, and to our community partners and facilitators for the work that you do and the work you did. While tonight's program is coming to a close, we hope the conversations don't end here. We invite you to continue connecting with one another, visit our community partner tables, and learn more about the resources and opportunities available throughout our community, and stay connected. Please join us outside the auditorium to network and continue the conversation. Thank you all for coming out.
Thank you, Karima.